Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007, after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. As a child, she was cheerful and close to her parents. However, as she grew older, Carly struggled with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Despite these challenges, she made efforts to overcome them. In 2014, at the age of 31, Carly lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia, with her two children, 7-year-old William and 3-year-old Cadence. On September 30, 2014, Carly's boyfriend, Sale, took her to Muswell Brook, where her daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly spent a few hours with Cadence at Andrew's house, arriving around 12:30 p.m. Sale dropped her off but did not stay, agreeing to return later that day. However, when Sale came back to pick Carly up, she was no longer at Andrew's house. According to Andrew, Carly and he got into an argument, and she left, planning to walk to the nearby McDonald's restaurant, about 20 minutes away. Sale was surprised when Carly didn't call to let him know where to meet her, so he tried calling her instead. However, he couldn't reach her. Assuming she had said she was going to McDonald's, Sale drove there to look for her. Along the way, he kept an eye out for her, thinking she might be waiting somewhere. He considered the possibility that her phone was dead, but he couldn't find her anywhere. She wasn't at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale spent some time driving around Muswell Brook, but it was all in vain. Carly had seemingly vanished. When Carly failed to return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that their routine was always the same. He would drop her off, she would get out of the car, wave goodbye, and then call and text him twice to let him know she was safe. But on this particular day, things didn't go as usual. Sale dropped her off at 12:30 p.m., but never heard from her again. Despite trying to call and text her, the phone just rang out. A key question emerged. Did Carly leave her ex-partner Andrew Easton's house, or was he hiding something? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but no one else could confirm she actually left his house. The police questioned neighbors and people along the route Carly would have taken to get to McDonald's, but nobody reported seeing her. This lack of eyewitnesses only fueled suspicion about Andrew. Unfortunately, There were no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house to verify his claim that Carly left around 2 p.m. The police searched fields behind a nearby residential area, but the chief investigator reported that nothing significant was found. The investigation will continue, and the police are urging anyone with information about Carly's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and carrying a tan handbag. Police investigators obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the house where Carly was last seen, looking for clues that could help explain her disappearance. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of criminal activity or new leads. However, they did stumble upon a suspicious discovery. Carly's Facebook account had been deleted just a few hours after she went missing, and before anyone had even reported her disappearance to the authorities. This mysterious deletion sparked a lot of questions and prompted further investigation. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents, Steve and Lorraine Williams, sought assistance in finding their daughter. With the help of Detective Timothy Seymour, they made a public appeal, requesting any information that could aid in the case. During the appeal, Lorraine became emotional and pleaded for help, saying that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help them. The family has struggled since Carly's disappearance, with Steve and Lorraine explaining that their situation is complicated, particularly when it comes to Carly's children. The children have 2 different fathers, and the family has had limited contact with them. Steve and Lorraine hope that this will change, allowing them to reconnect with their grandchildren. Lorraine expressed the deep sorrow of Carly's children, who would never again experience their mother's loving kisses, warm hugs, and laughter. They were unable to say goodbye, and their memories were frozen in time. She described the family's pain and frustration, feeling trapped in limbo, and emphasized their need to find Carly and give her dignity and respect in death. Carly's children, William and Cadence, needed to know what happened to their mother to heal and move forward, free from the burden of pain and uncertainty. Lorraine begged for the truth, expressing that while her daughter was gone, her children needed closure and justice. She implored the responsible person to come forward, break their silence, and let the family find peace. The police shifted their focus to Sale Newson, another possible suspect, as they were unable to connect Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner, Andrew Easton. Investigations revealed that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled. Sale was extremely jealous, which often sparked their arguments, despite their relatively short time together. Although Sale publicly claimed to be deeply in love with Carly, saying she was the first woman he had loved in 14 years, his actions told a different story. He started intimate relationships with other women almost immediately, even offering sex to several women just hours after reporting Carly missing. On October 2nd, just 2 days after Carly's disappearance, Sale spent the night with another woman, yet in public, he pretended to be grief-stricken over losing the love of his life. Detectives also learned that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before she vanished, triggered by Facebook messages from other men. However, while this evidence was suspicious, it was still circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to bring charges against Sale Newson. In 2015, authorities searched 3 properties in Muswellbrook and Scone, Est-Ouest, seizing 3 firearms, illegal substances, and arresting 24-year-old James Kineen, unrelated to Carly's disappearance, but a notable name in the investigation. 2 years after, on September 30, 2014, the police investigation had stalled with no new leads. But on August 7, 2016, a major breakthrough came when 2 pedestrians stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave in a bush off the road near Scone. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Carly McBride. The police waited 4 days before announcing the discovery, hoping to gather more evidence. Carly's parents, who are still grieving, are asking the public to come forward with any information they might have. They are thankful for the help that led to finding their daughter's body, but they still want to know who was responsible for her disappearance and are seeking closure. Over 10 months, investigators probed a case leading to Sale Newson's arrest warrant on June 19, 2017. After his arrest, Newson denied involvement in Carly McBride's death. Authorities also charged James Canine, 26, for helping Newson dispose of the body. The three knew each other from a rehab center for addicts, staying in touch despite leaving at different times. The trial of Sale Newson began in 2018 and lasted for years due to limited evidence. Prosecutors claimed Newson attacked Carly in a jealous rage, causing her death. Forensic experts found she died from multiple blunt force trauma, including 23 skull fractures and 13 torso and spinal fractures. The judge ruled Newson's actions caused Carly's death, noting he had claimed to be a skilled mixed martial arts fighter with 20 undefeated fights. The judge concluded Carly died from severe brain trauma caused by a high degree of force to the head, likely inflicted by Newson's fists, feet, or objects. During a search of Newson's house, police found a map in a shoebox under the bed with a circle around Muswell Brook and Scone, where Carly's remains were later found. The map also had numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it, which a senior constable linked to point-to-point cameras. Newson mentioned to Carly's father that the skeleton was missing hand bones, a detail only known to the police, Carly's parents, and the forensic medicine department. This suggested Newson was familiar with the crime scene and had left Carly's body there. The clothes on the remains matched what she wore on the day she disappeared, indicating she died soon after leaving her partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswell Brook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets, searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. While volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutors said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge found that Newson's motive for suddenly and violently attacking Carly was jealousy. Newson had gone to pick Carly up from Muswell Brook, expecting her to have spent time with her daughter as planned. Instead, he discovered she had met her ex-partner for 90 minutes. This revelation allegedly triggered a fit of jealousy in Newson, leading him to brutally attack Carly. Carly's mother, Lorraine Williams, recounted the immense grief and anxiety she experienced during a 2-year wait for justice. A wait that ended with the devastating realization that her happy and outgoing daughter would never come home to her 2 young children. When she finally saw Carly again, it was in the morgue. an experience she described as the worst day of her life. In December 2021, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038, nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing. Despite the guilty verdict, Newson maintained his innocence, stating to the judge. Newson's accomplice, James Canine, also denied his involvement but was found guilty by a jury in July 2022. The judge determined that Canine had lied to police 3 times to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted phone data to conceal his actions. At the time of his involvement in the Carly McBride case, Canine was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period, showing little reaction to the news. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed relief that justice had been served, but they also acknowledged that no matter the outcome, they would never be able to get their daughter back. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had 2 siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burke was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at a Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Austin Harff. Austin Harff was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida, to a wealthy and respected family of doctors. His father was a successful dentist with multiple private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical specialist. The family lived in a large, luxurious oceanfront home. When Austin was 13, his parents divorced, and his father moved out of the family home into a new residence with his new partner, who soon became his wife. Austin and his siblings stayed with their mother, but their father remained involved in their lives and provided financial support. Within a year, Austin's mother also remarried, and her new husband moved in with them. Although Austin struggled with his parents' divorce, he continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin dreamed of becoming a doctor like his parents and hoped to attend a prestigious medical school. In high school, he was both an honor student and an outcast. Despite his transformation into a tall, muscular, and charming young man, he remained shy and struggled to make friends and form romantic relationships. In his teenage diary, Austin wrote about feeling isolated at school, where his classmates labeled him a nerd and bullied him. He hoped that things would improve when he went to college, changed his social circle, and moved away from home. A few months before graduating from high school, Austin discovered that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's 4-year medical program. During his teenage years, Austin kept a personal diary where he confided about being ostracized by his classmates, who called him a nerd and teased him relentlessly. He harbored hope that his life would improve once he entered college, formed new friendships, and gained independence from his parents. As he approached the end of high school, Austin received the exciting news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's esteemed 4-year medical program. Austin's successful program completion paved the way for promising career opportunities and the chance to attend any U.S. medical school. Overjoyed that his dream had come true, he began his college journey with his parents' support. In a vlog, he shared his transition to independent adult life, but despite this new chapter, his shyness persisted, making it difficult for him to connect with peers. Austin briefly dated a girl, but she ended the relationship due to concerns about his behavior. Instead, he focused on bodybuilding during his freshman year, dedicating significant time to the gym and achieving impressive results, including developing strong muscles. However, his success was not solely due to his hard work and perseverance. He had also started using steroids regularly. Austin started a YouTube channel in the spring of 2016, where he posted various videos. Some were about sports and bodybuilding, while others featured him singing and playing the guitar, doing cover versions of popular songs, and mimicking famous artists. He also shared his thoughts on life and philosophy. However, over time, Austin's videos became increasingly concerning. He began to advise his followers against using steroids, claiming they could drive people insane. He also talked about having a crazy and normal side, and seemed confused by these different personalities. In some videos, he would speak in different accents, change his tone of voice, or burst into tears for no reason. His mood and facial expressions would also change suddenly, making it seem like he was just making faces at the camera. Looking back, experts believe that Austin was desperately trying to ask for help in his videos. The channel became his only outlet for expressing his feelings, as he struggled to make friends during his studies. Unfortunately, The videos also document his gradual descent into madness, with his behavior becoming more provocative, aggressive, and sensational. Many of his subscribers suspected that he was using controlled substances and recording his videos while under their influence. Austin's subscribers questioned him about his suspicious behavior, but he denied using drugs, citing his athletic background. However, his actions told a different story, with some even speculating that he might have a dissociative identity disorder. Meanwhile, when Austin returned home for summer break, his mother and sister were shocked by the drastic changes in him. Over the past year, Austin had undergone a dramatic physical transformation, building significant muscle mass. But the changes went beyond his physique. He had become increasingly odd, speaking nonsensically, and claiming he no longer needed sleep. At first, his family dismissed his claims, but they were forced to take him seriously when he insisted on patrolling the house at night, supposedly to protect them from dark forces. Austin followed through on his promise, wandering the house until morning, leaving his family concerned and confused. Every hour, Austin would check on his mother and sister, loudly reassuring them that they could sleep safely because he was watching over them. The next morning, his mother had a straightforward conversation with him, directly asking if he was using drugs. Austin honestly admitted that he had tried nearly every drug over the past year, explaining how each one affected him. He mentioned a powerful synthetic drug that caused intense hallucinations, violent outbursts, and could even be fatal. Despite this, Austin promised his mother that it was behind him and he no longer used the drug that had driven him to madness. After listening to her son, Mrs. Harif made a critical mistake. She didn't seek help from medical professionals, deciding instead to handle the situation on her own. As a pharmacist, she took matters into her own hands, giving Austin a sedative and a sleeping pill, thinking it would calm him down and help him sleep after a restless night. Austin continued to patrol the house every night, assuring its occupants that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. This went on for weeks, but the mother refused to seek professional help or tell her ex-husband about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited a former classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was surprised by the unannounced visit, especially since they hadn't seen each other in over a year. When asked why he came, Austin claimed he had forgotten his birth year and urgently needed to know the answer. The classmate told him he was born in 1996. Austin then suddenly turned around and left without saying a word. His strange behavior frightened and confused the classmate, who immediately called Mrs. Harif to share what had happened and ask if Austin might be using drugs. She grew concerned about her son's behavior and decided to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state. She shared her worries with him, and he immediately flew to Florida to discuss the situation with their son. After talking to him, the father suggested that their son voluntarily check into a clinic for an evaluation, but the son refused. The father then had a heartfelt conversation with the mother, and together they decided to seek compulsory examination and treatment for their son at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. Unfortunately, they couldn't act fast enough. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach, taking advantage of the hot weather. His mother asked Haley to accompany her brother to keep an eye on him. Austin was thrilled about the outing, but he dressed unusually warmly, as if preparing for a trip to the mountains. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long-sleeved pants, boots, and ski goggles. His friends were initially silent when they saw him, then burst out laughing. A few seconds later, the group started teasing Austin about his outfit, asking if he was okay. Austin's anger surged, and he threatened to harm one of them if they thought he was crazy. Although they didn't take him seriously, they backed off to be safe. Haley noticed her brother was on the edge and decided to intervene. She took him aside for a private conversation, where Austin revealed a shocking secret. He was half human, half wild animal, immortal, and possessed superhuman strength. Haley was frightened, but tried to stay calm to avoid provoking Austin further. Despite the intense conversation, Austin acted normally at the beach, joking and playing volleyball with friends. As the evening drew to a close, the group said their goodbyes and headed their separate ways. Austin and Haley went to a nearby restaurant to meet their father and his wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality and then headed towards a busy highway, planning to cross it recklessly through the fast-moving traffic. Haley intervened when she realized what was happening and pulled her brother away, urging him to hurry because they had a prior commitment. Austin agreed not to keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin's behavior was peculiar. He got up from the table several times, went outside, and looked around nervously, as if he feared someone was watching him. Upon returning, he revealed his immortality to his father and stepmother. When his father suggested seeking professional help, Austin became defensive, insisting he wasn't crazy, and in a fit of anger, pushed his father and stormed out of the restaurant. A young man's brutal attack on an elderly couple and their neighbor is a terrifying incident that unfolded like a horror movie. After leaving a restaurant, the young man, Austin, walked several miles until he stumbled upon an open garage in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Inside the garage was an elderly couple, John Stevens, 59, and Michelle Mishcon Stevens, 56, who were preparing for a quiet movie night. They married for over 25 years, had 3 adult children, and were enjoying their retirement. On this particular evening, John had gone for a walk with their dog, while Michelle set up for their usual movie night. When Michelle saw Austin on their lawn, she didn't feel threatened and even offered to help him. However, the situation took a dark turn. Their neighbor, Jeffrey Pfizer, who lived across the street and was friendly with the Stevens, heard strange noises outside around 9 p.m. He looked into the yard and was met with Michelle's blood-curdling scream. Without hesitation, Jeffrey rushed to help his neighbors, where he saw a tall, large young man attacking an elderly woman by her open garage. Jeffrey tried to intervene, but the young man was incredibly strong and knocked him to the ground. As Jeffrey struggled to get up, the assailant stabbed him multiple times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was outmatched and needed assistance, Jeffrey quickly ran into his friend's house to distract the attacker and lead him away from himself. He escaped through the back door and made his way to his own home. Once inside, he realized the assailant had not followed him and had returned to the neighbor's house, where Michelle was being attacked. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency services, reporting that he and his elderly neighbor had been victims of an armed attack by a stranger with a knife. After speaking with the emergency operator, Jeffrey fell silent, listening carefully. He soon became convinced that the attacker was no longer outside his door, but had remained at the neighbor's house. The assailant began making loud animal-like noises, similar to a wild beast growling, accompanied by screams of terror and moans. Tragically, the police took about 10 minutes to arrive, but by then it was too late. The assault had turned fatal, and the outcome was devastating. The officers were met with a horrific and inexplicable scene upon approaching the garage. 2 officers drew their weapons as they entered, but froze in shock at the doorway. Before them lay the lifeless body of Michelle Mishcon Stevens, the homeowner, in a pool of blood. The autopsy would later reveal that she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. As they ventured further into the dimly lit garage, they spotted 2 more individuals on the ground. It took a moment for the officers to comprehend the disturbing scene. One man was lying on the ground, desperately crying out for help in a strained voice. Above him, another man was pinning him down, grasping his neck with one hand and tilting his head back with the other. The officers ordered the attacker to release the victim, threatening to shoot if necessary, but the assailant didn't respond. Due to the risk of hitting the victim, firing was not an option. Instead, one officer pulled out a taser, warning the attacker that he was about to be stunned. As the officer moved closer, he was met with a gruesome sight. The attacker was not only holding the victim down, but was also biting his face, clutching his head and neck tightly. The victim was John Stevens, Michelle's husband, and he was lying in a vast pool of blood. Part of his left cheek was missing, and his lip, nose, and ear were severely mutilated, seemingly chewed off. An elderly man was severely attacked and unable to move, silently pleading for help. The officer tried to stop the attacker by using a taser, but it had no effect. The attacker continued to viciously bite the victim's face, even after receiving a kick to the face. Multiple kicks did not deter him. Additional police officers arrived, including one with a police dog, which was released to subdue the attacker. The dog bit the attacker's arm, but he showed no signs of feeling pain and managed to break free, causing himself further injury. Finally, a powerful kick from an officer disoriented the attacker long enough to allow him to be handcuffed. Immediately after being restrained, the attacker claimed he felt unwell, possibly due to something he had eaten, before losing consciousness and convulsing. 4 people were taken to the hospital after a violent incident. Mrs. Stevens died at the scene, and her husband died on the way to the hospital due to severe injuries from stab wounds. The injured neighbor, who reported the incident, survived but suffered permanent nerve and tendon damage to his right hand. The attacker, Austin Harif, fell into a coma after drinking weed killer from a bottle in the garage, which severely burned his esophagus and stomach. He spent several days close to death, but was eventually saved. When he woke up 2 weeks later, he claimed to have no memory of the events. Gradually, Austin started to remember the argument with his father and walking away. He then recalled seeing a ghost-like figure leading him through dark alleys until he saw a lantern near the Stevens garage, where he attacked Mrs. Stevens. He claimed to have seen her as evil and tried to rid her of it. When the neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, intervened, Austin perceived him as a demon and attacked him with a knife. After Fisher escaped, Austin continued to assault Mrs. Stevens until she showed no signs of life. He then drank from the bottle thinking it was alcohol, and soon heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed no memory of what happened next. At the hospital, tests revealed no drugs, medication, or alcohol in Austin's blood, leading to suspicions of a psychotic break. The case attracted widespread media attention due to its brutality and uncertainty. While some believed Austin was faking insanity to avoid punishment, a psychological expert concluded that he had a mental illness that led to an acute psychotic episode. However, the prosecutor did not believe Austin met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. Suggestions arose that Austin's mental health had deteriorated due to drug use and social difficulties, but he was clean at the time of the crime. Austin's father revealed a family history of schizophrenia, and a rare disorder called clinical lycanthropy delusion was suspected, which might explain Austin's wild behavior. However, no psychiatrists confirmed the diagnosis. After treatment, Austin was transferred to jail, where he awaits trial. His lawyers claim he is mentally ill, while the relatives of the victims hope he will be found competent and sentenced to death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve two intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw 3 unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. The key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible and called for a boycott of the ship owners' company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night, after 2:30 a.m., and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Askin and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Young. Michelle Marie Young born in February 1977 in New York, grew up with her younger sister Meredith, with whom she was extremely close. Their mother, Linda, devoted significant time to her daughters, encouraging their development and nurturing their talents. Michelle was drawn to law and economics from an early age, hoping to pursue a career in these fields. After high school, she applied to several universities and was accepted into a prominent institution in North Carolina's capital. At the university, Michelle excelled in her economics and law studies, earning a master's degree. Upon graduation, she landed a prestigious position at a leading accounting firm in the state. Michelle's career flourished, earning a good income and making ambitious plans for her future. To celebrate her 24th birthday, she gathered with friends and colleagues at a popular local venue. During the celebration, a stranger accidentally knocked a cocktail out of Michelle's hands. The apologetic stranger, Jason Young, offered to buy her another drink. As they conversed, Jason's charming and witty nature caught Michelle's attention. He asked her out on a date, and Michelle, feeling a spark, accepted, believing their encounter was meant to be. After they started talking, they discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the same university, with Jason graduating 3 years earlier. They shared a love for the same hockey team and music group. Their mutual interests quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship, but living together or getting married was not an option at that point. Jason still lived with his parents in Brevard and would only visit Michelle in Raleigh on weekends or meet her during business trips to the state capital. During one of these visits, Michelle surprised Jason with the news that she was pregnant. This revelation shocked both of them, as they weren't ready to become parents. They were focused on their careers, making progress, and hadn't planned on starting a family yet. Jason immediately accepted the situation, but Michelle was unsure at first, eventually deciding to keep the baby and not have an abortion. It took Jason about a month to come to terms with the news, after which he relocated to Raleigh to be close to Michelle, who was now pregnant. A few months later, they got married, but not because of romantic feelings or the pregnancy itself. The real reason was that Michelle lacked health insurance, and having a child would have been extremely costly without it. Marriage provided a solution, allowing them to avoid these expenses. Michelle gave birth to her daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth, in the spring of 2004. As a newlywed, Michelle dedicated herself to domestic life and family responsibilities, with the help of her mother and younger sister. Although Michelle's family initially had reservations about Jason, they made an effort to avoid conflicts and accept him. Later that year, the Young family moved into a large house in a quiet, landscaped area of the city. During her visits, Michelle's mother, Linda, noticed that there was tension within the family. Jason had a volatile temper, and Michelle constantly worked to resolve their disputes and present a united front in public, pretending to be a happy wife and mother. Only her mother, Linda, knew the truth about their relationship. An ominous sign came when Cassidy was just 2 years old. Michelle became pregnant again. She tentatively shared the news with Jason, but he surprisingly reacted with calmness and even seemed happy about it. The family drove to Brevard to share the good news with Jason's parents. They visited for the weekend, celebrating with relatives on the first day. The next day, they left their young daughter with her grandparents for a few hours and went to a restaurant to celebrate together. On their way home, Jason, who was driving, overcorrected and oversteered, causing the car to go off the road and into a ravine. Although they were shaken and had some scrapes and bruises, they were not seriously injured. However, the shock of the accident caused Michelle to miscarry, which left her deeply worried. Jason's calm reaction to the accident, the loss of their child, and his apparent indifference to his wife's distress seemed suspicious. In hindsight, Linda Fisher would later consider the accident a bad omen that they had ignored at the time. They had a friend named Michelle Manny from their university days. After losing touch for a while, Jason ran into her during a work trip in the spring of 2006. He told his wife about the encounter, and they decided to invite Michelle over for a visit. Michelle accepted the invitation and opened up about her unhappy marriage and relationship issues. She constantly praised Jason, telling his wife how lucky she was to have him. Although Michelle noticed Michelle's flirting behavior, she genuinely wanted to comfort and support her friend. However, Jason saw this as an opportunity to take their friendship to the next level. He had always been flirtatious, but this time, his interactions with Michelle quickly escalated beyond friendly support. They started calling each other almost daily and secretly meeting up. Jason would justify his absence by saying he was on business trips, and his wife remained unaware of what was really going on. In the summer of 2006, Michelle told her husband Jason that she was pregnant again. However, this time, Jason was unhappy about the news. Michelle was confused and felt distant from her husband, but she attributed this to the miscarriage they had experienced a few months prior. Unbeknownst to Michelle, Jason was secretly contemplating how to end their marriage with minimal personal consequences. In early November, when Michelle was 5 months pregnant, Jason went on a business trip, driving 300 miles from home and booking a hotel room halfway through his journey. That evening, Michelle had a lengthy phone conversation with her best friend, discussing their marital problems and revealing that she had a significant argument with Jason the night before he left. After talking to her, she went upstairs, put her daughter to bed, and then fell asleep beside her around 10 p.m. Meanwhile, Jason arrived at the hotel, claiming he was exhausted from the journey, and went straight to his room to rest. However, his real intention was to carefully observe the hotel's entrances, exits, and security cameras, plotting how to sneak out and back in without being detected. He was working on creating a foolproof alibi for what he believed would be the perfect crime. In the early morning hours, Young called his sister-in-law, Meredith, for assistance. He explained that he wanted to surprise his wife, Michelle, with a piece of jewelry for their wedding anniversary, but he had accidentally sent the order confirmation to their home fax machine. He was worried that Michelle would see the surprise and asked Meredith to help him retrieve the fax. Meredith, despite her dislike for her son-in-law, agreed to help. When she arrived at Michelle's house, she entered through a secret door in the garage, which was always left unlocked and known only to family members. The house was eerily quiet, and Meredith found Michelle's personal belongings, including her papers, keys, and wallet, in the hallway, suggesting that she hadn't left the house. Meredith then went upstairs and called out to her sister and niece, but there was no response. As she entered the bedroom, Meredith was met with a horrific scene. Michelle lay lifeless on the floor, her skull severely fractured, surrounded by a pool of her own blood. The walls, furniture, and floor were covered in blood, with bloody footprints from the baby nearby. Sadly, Michelle had been dead for hours, and nothing could be done to help her. Cassidy's sister quickly called emergency services when she heard a strange noise coming from under the bed. When she looked, she saw Cassidy staring back at her in confusion. Despite being shaken, Cassidy was unharmed. It became clear that she had witnessed her mother's death and had stayed by her body for hours, as evidenced by the floor marks and the toys she had brought to her mother. Further investigation revealed that Michelle's body bore the signs of a brutal and prolonged beating, with numerous bruises, abrasions, and fractures. Her teeth had been knocked out, and her skull was fractured by a heavy, blunt object that was never recovered. A bloody pillow lay nearby, suggesting that the killer had used it to smother the victim. The lack of stolen items and absence of forced entry or broken locks suggested that the perpetrator's sole intention was murder, and that they must have had a key or known about the secret door, which was only known to family members. The main suspect in the case was the husband of the deceased, but he claimed to have a solid alibi. He said he checked into his hotel room in the evening and didn't leave until morning, when he attended a scheduled business meeting. An investigation confirmed that he used his room key card to enter and exit his room. However, further investigation revealed several inconsistencies. For instance, a hotel employee found that the emergency exit door had been propped open with a cobblestone to prevent it from slamming shut. The surveillance camera that monitored this door had been intentionally disabled on the night of the murder. In fact, it stopped recording around half an hour after the suspect checked into his room. Furthermore, a man resembling the suspect was seen getting gas at a station between the hotel and the crime scene. When asked to provide identification, he refused and quickly left the station without waiting for change. The gas station attendant later identified the suspect, but he continued to deny any involvement, claiming he had stayed in his hotel room all night. On the eve of the tragedy, Jason Young made over 24 calls to Michelle, followed by 5 brief calls to his mistress, each lasting no more than 15 seconds. This suggests that Jason may have been panicking. Notably, all these calls were made outside the hotel, despite his claim of having stayed there all night. Additionally, Jason was late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners and appeared confused. While these events are suspicious, they do not provide conclusive evidence, individually or collectively, to prove that Jason Young was responsible for the brutal murder of his pregnant wife. For nearly 3 years, Jason lived a normal life, even gaining custody of his young daughter, a devastating blow to his late wife's relatives. During this time, he began openly dating Mani, a friend of his deceased wife Michelle, which only fueled suspicion that he was responsible for her brutal murder. Jason was finally arrested in 2009, but the initial trial ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury, despite substantial evidence pointing to his guilt. However, the case was reopened in 2012 after new evidence emerged, including eyewitness testimony placing Jason near a hotel on the night of the murder. Crucial pieces of evidence included sightings of his distinctive white car parked near his home in a dark lot on the night of the crime. Additionally, a child psychologist testified about Jason's daughter Cassidy's disturbing doll play, in which she demonstrated her father hitting her mother, then not getting up off the floor. Mani testified in court, revealing that Jason had an affair with her, but claimed that Jason was miserable in his marriage, as he had told everyone. Another of Jason's former mistresses testified that she was frightened of his violent outbursts when he lost control. After a lengthy trial, Jason Young was found guilty of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jason filed his first appeal in 2014, but it was denied. In 2018, he requested a review of his case, but the State Court of Appeals again denied it. Cassidy, the daughter of Jason's murdered wife, was left without her parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carol Maltese. Carol Nicole Maltese was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy. She was the only child of Fabio and Josephine and had a mix of Italian and Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents got divorced, and she stayed with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, got remarried, and had more children. Carol's mother, Josephine, chose to stay in Italy and raise her daughter on her own. Despite her former husband's lack of support, Josephine worked multiple jobs to give Carol a good education and a better life. Carol grew up to be a kind, sociable, and beautiful girl with many friends. She was active in sports, particularly horseback riding, and loved to dance. She was fluent in 3 languages, enjoyed traveling across Europe, reading, and could talk about almost any subject. As a teenager, Carol became a stunning beauty with a slim figure, and she loved being the center of attention. After finishing school, Carol went on to study industrial design, arts, and fashion at a technical university. She quickly became one of the top students in her class. Carol began dating a young man, a year older, and studying architecture and design during her freshman year. When she was 20, she discovered she was pregnant, which came as a shock to both her and the father. Despite being unprepared, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol gave birth to a son, and she and the father were forced to drop out of school due to financial constraints. They moved to Verona for better job opportunities to support their family. Carol landed a job as a sales consultant at a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son turned 1, while her partner worked from home and took care of their child. In mid-2019, Carol started an affair with Angelo, secretly meeting him in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. However, just before the new year, the father of her child discovered her infidelity and ended their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best to leave since she was already planning to move in with her new boyfriend. However, a complication came up. Angelo still lived with his parents, and it wasn't possible for Carol to move in there with her child from a previous relationship. So, they made the decision to rent a place together instead. When the economic crisis hit, they lost their jobs and couldn't afford their apartment. Carol moved in with her new boyfriend's parents and made the difficult decision to leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father until things got better and she could bring him to live with her. As the economic crisis worsened, a self-isolation regime was put in place, and everyone was forced to stay at home. Carol struggled financially during this time and relied on Angelo and his parents for support, unable to contribute financially to her son's care. To make matters worse, Carol's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive therapy. With no other options, Carol desperately sought ways to earn money from home to support her son and ill mother. She turned to social media and YouTube, sharing her experiences of living in isolation and the challenges she faced in an effort to generate an income during the lockdown. Carol's early blog posts didn't gain much traction, but her attractive appearance caught readers' attention. She received flattering comments as well as some inappropriate proposals. One subscriber suggested she join OnlyFans, a platform where her looks would be in high demand, and she could quickly become a star and earn a lot of money. Taking this advice, Carol created an account under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting provocative photos and short videos. She quickly gained a large following of paying customers. While Carol's earnings increased, she kept her new career a secret from her boyfriend and close family members. As time passed, Carol's content became more explicit and sophisticated as she worked to satisfy her fans. She herself found enjoyment in this line of work. However, Carol was able to keep her secret hidden for only about 6 months before someone she knew discovered her account. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone knew how she was making a living. Carol's friends and family in Italy didn't understand her decision to work in the adult film industry. They saw it as immoral and were embarrassed to be associated with her. Carol, on the other hand, was confident that her work was a form of art that could bring her success, wealth, and fame. As she became more popular, adult film studios and directors approached her with offers to star in their films, which she accepted. She started participating in group shoots and public performances, but her boyfriend Angelo was still in the dark, thinking she was working remotely as a designer. However, when Angelo finally found out the truth, he was shocked and unsure of what to do. But when his parents discovered Carol's profession, they demanded that he break up with her immediately, fearing that she would bring shame to their family. Carol's OnlyFans account had become extremely successful, earning her enough money to rent her own place and attracting offers from directors. Her fees continued to rise, and she professed in interviews that this was not a long-term career goal. Instead, she planned to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. For now, she was enjoying her work and was well compensated. Despite her success, Carol frequently spoke about the constant moral pressure she faced from others. Their judgments and attempts to shame her led to feelings of anxiety and guilt. However, she defended her work as a form of art and believed that every woman should have the freedom to choose her profession without fear of judgment. Carol started anew in Rescaldina, Milan province, leaving her adult film career behind and working as a sales consultant at a perfume boutique. However, this fresh start was short-lived. She met David Fontana, a 42-year-old banker and nude photographer, online. He was seeking a model, and Carol responded, feeling an instant attraction during their first meeting. Despite being married, Fontana pursued a relationship with Carol, and they began dating, combining photo shoots with intimacy. Fontana learned about Carol's past and encouraged her to return to filmmaking, recognizing her talent. He had complex feelings for her, loving and possessive, yet also enjoying seeing her in adult films. After divorcing his wife in March 2021, Fontana moved in with Carol, and they explored their explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating popular content on OnlyFans, taking a share of the profits from their joint ventures. Carol's success in the adult film industry led to her receiving lucrative contract offers from foreign directors and studios. However, her boyfriend Fontana became jealous and reacted angrily when others showed interest in her. Months later, Angelo, who was still in love with Carol, reached out to her and confessed his feelings. He proposed that they get back together, promising not to interfere with her work. Carol was touched by his words but revealed that she was already in a relationship with someone else, David. Despite this, Carol and Angelo continued to stay in touch. However, when David found out about their communication, he became furious and threatened Angelo. He even went as far as setting Angelo's car on fire. Angelo reported the threats and property damage to the police, and a restraining order was issued against David. However, there was no evidence to link David to the arson, so he didn't have to pay for the damages. As Carol's popularity grew, she traveled frequently for shoots and gained over 30,000 followers. She was saving money to buy a home, take her son with her, and eventually leave the adult film industry to focus on raising him and finding a new job. Meanwhile, she started creating custom videos, which became a profitable venture. Carol received scripts from fans who paid her to bring their fantasies to life. She continued to work with Fontana on filming and editing, and they shared the profits and lived together. In September 2021, she met Salvatore Galdo, an actor, on a film set, and they started working together on explicit films. As they worked together, Carol and Galdo developed real feelings for each other, and they began a romantic relationship in secret, afraid of how David, her current partner, might react. She waited for the right moment to tell David everything and end their relationship. A few months later, Galdo proposed to Carol with an engagement ring, and she happily accepted. By the end of the year, she had saved enough money to buy her own home. Carol planned to take her son, Mary, with her and decided it was time to talk to Fontana about her decision. Fontana took the news surprisingly well, understanding that Carol was moving on to her new partner. However, they still had unfinished projects that they had already been paid for, so they agreed to complete the work and then go their separate ways. Carol's sudden and mysterious disappearance in 2022, similar to Carol's earlier vanishing act, left everyone stunned. She abruptly stopped acting in films, discontinued her online streams, and ceased communication with colleagues. Moreover, she refused to accept new project offers from directors. Although many people were aware that Carol had planned to leave the entertainment industry, her complete disappearance still came as a surprise. Carol's friends and husband, Salvatore, grew concerned when she stopped responding to their calls. Despite her reassurances via social media, they sensed something was amiss. Months passed, and Carol's occasional social media posts revealed she'd gone on a seaside vacation without telling anyone. Her brief, curt responses only added to their unease. On March 20, 2022, a passerby discovered large black trash bags near a rocky cliff in the Italian community of Borno. Upon approach, the passerby found human fingers poking through the torn polyethylene. He immediately reported the gruesome find to the police, who discovered 4 bags containing a human body divided into 18 parts. The remains were so disfigured that identification seemed impossible. For Forensic experts determined the young woman had died at least 2 months prior, but the cause of death remained unknown. It was clear the body had been stored in a freezer before being dumped, likely to keep it hidden. The criminal had removed distinctive features, tattoos, and skin pieces, then burned, cut, and doused the skin in acid to conceal the tattoos. Despite this, investigators pieced together tattoo fragments and matched them to a missing persons database. A news report about the body led a woman from the adult film industry to recognize the tattoos as belonging to a missing colleague, Charlotte. This information allowed law enforcement to identify Carol, who had become engaged to her coworker, Salvatore Galdo, before her disappearance. What's curious is that he didn't report her missing. Salvatore became the prime suspect, but his distraught reaction and conversation history with Carol seemed genuine. However, his story didn't add up, leading to another suspect, David, being questioned. David showed up at the police station to report Carol missing, oblivious to the recent discovery. His nervous, contradictory story eventually led to his confession. He had accidentally killed Carol. David Fontana claimed to be filming a scenario for a client who had paid a large sum of money. The script involved binding a woman, taping her mouth shut, covering her head with a bag, and brutally beating her with various tools, including a hammer. David was supposed to pretend to inflict severe pain without actually harming her. However, he allegedly went too far and struck her with a hammer, fracturing her skull. Instead of calling for help, he ended her suffering with another blow. Panicked, he dismembered the body and stored it in his freezer for over 2 months before deciding to dispose of it. The investigation revealed that David was the mysterious client who had orchestrated the entire scenario to exact revenge on the woman, Carol, who had decided to leave him. During the torture session, he extracted her phone password, which was supposedly part of the script. On January 11th, David fatally struck Carol with a hammer and used her credit card to buy a freezer, saw, and axe to dismember her body. He disfigured the body to prevent identification and stored the parts in the freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he communicated with Carol's relatives and friends on her behalf, creating the illusion that she was alive. By the end of March, David decided to dispose of the body by dumping it off a cliff. However, the remains were discovered 2 days later, and authorities tracked him down within a week. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed that he loved Carol and had taken her life unintentionally. Despite his claims, the court found David guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 30 years in prison, ordering him to pay compensation to Carol's son, mother, and the father of her child. Surprisingly, the dismemberment of the body was not considered an aggravating factor, making David potentially eligible for parole.